Good evening, yeah, there we go. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We'll be starting here in a couple of minutes, but while we have a moment, if I could just remind everyone who's here in the audience to please silence or turn off your cell phones so we don't have any unexpected interruptions during the course of the meeting. Thank you for being here. Good evening, everyone. Tonight is the first budget hearing of the City of South Miami. The City Commission is now in session. Again, if you could please silence or turn off your cell phones, we'd greatly appreciate it. Madam Clerk, if you can call the roll, please.
Yes, Mayor Fernandez,
Present.
Vice Mayor Bonish,
Here.
Commissioner Corey,
Present.
you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If we could please stand for a brief moment of silence. Commissioner Corey, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Absolutely.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, if you can note for the record that Commissioner Kai is now in attendance. Thank you. Okay. Folks, today we have two items on the agenda. Unless there's an objection, I'm going to have the clerk read both ordinances into the record, and then we'll open up the budget for a brief presentation by the manager and any questions that my colleagues may have. Madam Clerk, if you could read the items, please.
Yes, item 1, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of South Miami, Florida, adopting the proposed millage rate for the fiscal year commencing October 1, 2024 through September 30, 2025, which amount may be amended at the first or second reading, and adopting the final millage rate on second reading. Item 2, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of South Miami adopting a tentative budget for the city for fiscal year commencing October 1, 2024 and ending September 30, 2025, and which budget may be amended at the first or second reading of this ordinance, adopting the final budget on second reading, providing for salaries, expenses of the City Commission and officers as required by the city charter.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager, would you like to give a brief presentation before we open up the items for public hearing?
Yes, sir, Mayor. Our CFO is going to provide a presentation to share some information and some of the changes from the budget that was shared at the millage study meeting. So that way you have an understanding of what had changed from that budget to this budget. So the CFO will run through a presentation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Riverall, you're recognized. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here. Thank you. Budget highlights some of the things that have changed from the budget workshop that was held in July to where we are today and what's being presented and adopted, hopefully, by ordinance later. Maintains the same 3.9500, which is the millage that we currently have in fiscal year 24. So we're holding the same millage is being presented in this budget and was developed using that same millage. Taxable assessed value increased by 8.6%. Again, that's information that was presented at the workshop. That's the assessed values provided by the property appraiser's office. We were able to obtain about $570,000 in savings from the budget due to workers' comp, general liability insurance, just insurance in general. That helped us maintain the millage the same, and it did, with our budget increased, but that savings of 570 helped offset some of those other increases, like salary increases, cost of living increases, things like that. Wage increase, staffing, I think you saw or you've heard the presentation, the Evergreen study, which was presented. This budget takes into account a staged approach in trying to bring wages up to what they should be, to stay in line with the market. Emergency reserves maintained at 25%, something that we strive for and continue to maintain. And our idle funds are strategically invested in different money markets, pools that we use to try to maximize our return so that it helps us gain more revenue on idle cash. So we'll continue to maintain that same practice. And it's been working for us very well lately. Proposed millage rates. We presented this at the last budget workshop. We added some additional information, which was presented. One of the commissioners asked a question in reference to what is our millage? What would our millage be if you took out solid waste? We're one of the few cities that has our solid waste built into the ad valorem rate, so we do not charge property owners a sanitation or a garbage and trash fee. So this small verbiage just explains of the 2,863 properties that we have, which is what is used to collect recycling, and provides a budget of $1.9 million for sanitation. In essence, trying to compare it apples to apples with some of the other entities, we would be able to bring down the millage to about 3.2430. And in turn, to cover the cost of the sanitation, it would be roughly about $666 per year per property owner. Sort of like what Miami-Dade County charges for theirs. Again, we don't have that fee, but that gives you somewhat of it tries to put an apples to apples comparison as best we could. So some of the budget highlights, compensation increases, as I mentioned. There is 2 new positions built into this budget right now. One is the Administrative Services Coordinator, which was discussed at the workshop, and we've added an additional for streets and maintenance, a dedicated maintenance worker for the town center. That would be for the parking garage. That would be their sole responsibility would be to help enhance and maintain the town center in great conditions. Another consideration, something that we've been talking about, is grant writer. It's not in this budget, what's being presented before you. But it's something that maybe you may want to consider in your discussions. Public safety, radios. Radios is a big item. Miami-Dade County has moved to a new radio system. We have had the same radios for a while. In this budget, you have money set aside to upgrade our radios for our police officers. And I believe this only covers not the in-vehicle radios, but the ones that they carry.
Sorry to interrupt you, but do you know when the last time that they were upgraded was? Or
I
does the
believe we
chief know?
financed them.
Because
Do
the
you know?
chief's there, so
10
maybe he
years?
knows.
Okay.
10
We
years.
financed them. I remember we were financing them in 2011, but 10 plus
Okay,
years.
thank you.
I know it's been a long time. Wage adjustments continue for public safety. It was incorporated into the Evergreen. Provides enhancement for training. There is a good amount of enhanced training, something that we've upgraded and we've focused on in this budget. And that is for nighttime training, daytime training, training for, as it says, escalation or de-escalation and crisis intervention. Those are things that we focused on this budget and is a big part of the public safety budget. Parks and recreations, big items. Dante Facel, you see in the CIP, $3.34 million for Dante Facel. Also for Dante Facel, $390,000 for a trail and 2 pickleball courts. We're doing a master plan that would put us from 10-year master plan 2026 to 2035. The current master plan has outlasted its useful life, and with all of the changes that have occurred in the last 10 years, it's time to now bring up the next 10. Palmer Park is having their own master plan. As you can see, it's just dedicated for what is the best use for Palmer Park and how to enhance that park. Purchase temporary restroom trailer. You've heard a ton about that. We're in the process. Tonight, you will be hearing discussions in reference to the construction of the permanent restroom facility. Well, during the construction, which is expected to be a year long, this allows us to buy a nice portable trailer bathroom facility that can be used for park goers and the soccer program and things like that nature. So that's built into this, which I think is a much needed utility. Security cameras throughout multiple facilities, again, enhancing security at all of our parks. We do have park cameras that have been installed many years ago. We're replacing them with the same camera system, having one camera provider as what we do in the parking garage and in some of our other park facilities.
Finish your slide and we'll have some questions.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. And senior citizens enhancements for their program, so they can dance and stuff.
If we can pause right there, I believe we have a question from Commissioner Kaya, and then followed by the Vice Mayor. Commissioner Kaya, you're recognized.
Thank you, Alfredo. I don't know if Q's not here, but can we, I wasn't aware that we're doing something for Fuchs Park on the volleyball facilities. Can we, what is it that we're doing there? Or maybe I just missed it.
We're doing renovations to both outdoor volleyball facilities at each park. So each has a court currently.
What are we doing, just resanding?
I think we're resanding, renetting. Mr. Manager, if you
Are we
can
doing
explain.
lights?
I'm not sure lights will verify that, but yes, obviously we're resanding and a few other elements. We'll get the full scope, but I'm not aware of any lights being included.
All right.
Further questions?
No.
No? Okay, Madam Vice Mayor?
I'm sorry, because I know I've asked this question once before, but I can't remember the answer. The $135,000 for the cameras, are they passive cameras or is somebody actively monitoring them?
Passive cameras they're going to be accessible at police 911 and on the web. It's sort of like a ring. It's an enhanced camera, but somebody's not actively watching all of the cameras. To centralize our security cameras.
Okay, so they're unlike the ones in the parking garage that are actively monitored.
Those are on multiple sites, but there's nobody physically watching
Okay.
all of those cameras either.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Continue, sir.
So some of the big ticket items, significant changes from the workshop. $864,000 was appropriation from the fleet. You saw in the last commission, we adopted a large amount of fleet, and we're using the ARPA due to the constraints in time to help alleviate some of the CIP expenditures for fiscal year 25. Also, you see we increased the Dante Facel in the CIP by $200,000 for that building. It's continuously being reviewed by multiple agencies, from fire to DERM to WASA. So all of those have come back with comments which are going to increase the cost of this facility. And these are necessities that need to be if we want to build the building. PTP, we increased the budget by $828,000 to fund 2 traffic circles that have already been designed and procured. We're just waiting to the fiscal year in October 1st. If approved tonight, and ultimately at the final budget hearing on the 17th, we will hopefully move forward with the purchase of those 2 traffic circles. And lastly, we increased stormwater drain for one project that had some modifications to the scope, providing an additional inlet and modifying an existing speed hump. And that's the project that's located on 65th Avenue between 50th and 52 Street. Now, these are just some changes in the general fund that have occurred due to new information or modifications at requests. Additional funds, so 70 residential discount parking program, that is something that was discussed at the workshop, providing a program similar to City Miami has, similar to what Miami Beach has, where residents, they register with finance and approved because they provide the proper documentation and they qualify, they will have a discounted rate in parking throughout the city at different locations. So that program is something that I'm hoping to bring back. I'm hoping on the 17th, a program for your review, and it'll require a schedule of fee change. Intergovernmental, these are revenues that we receive from the state of Florida. They tell us how much they're estimating that we collect. They update it periodically, and $45,000 in additional revenue, which is great. So these are some of the changes in expenses. I'll run through some of the majors. Added for annexation expenses, $35,000. That's an initiative that we're continuously to focus on multiple areas. Reduce special events at so many second Saturdays. 4th of July, we want 5 more minutes of fireworks. We're going big time. So we're adding $3,500 for that. Senior events, again, new monthly garden program. 20 evergreen adjustments. We were able to, because of personnel changes since the study came out to when we're implementing beginning on October 1st, people have left, people have come. So that has modified the actual amounts provided in that study. Reduction in South Miami Park restroom trailer. Again, you heard me. What we did was we reduced it because we had a large amount. We had $190,000 after doing procurement and looking at the different temporary facilities that are available. And instead of leasing it, purchasing it on our own, it actually provided a lot of savings. So that's why you see it in the CIP and with $25,000 of an expense just to manage it. We have an outside company that's going to come in and take the refuse with it. Increase in public works salary, $12,000. We increased that budget. And future land use projects, $50,000 to help the attorneys, help the planning with some of these reports that are needed in front of the commission. So the net change is about $297,000 changes to expenses. With that, I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very, very much. Is there a way that we can have that, or at least the last page while we have our conversations, or have it up?
Yep. John, put me back up on the screen. Thanks.
To
Or-
the Vice Mayor, could I just ask
Of
a
course.
question? So I had a question from one of the earlier parts of the slide. We talked about an 8% increase in, I guess, in millage, or what we received this year from last year. I was wondering if you knew how that compares to other cities that we've, in terms of increase.
The question is how it compares in the setting of the millage. In other words,
No.
maintaining the millage at
Oh, sorry, no, the
3.95.
revenue
No.
that we generated.
The
Yeah.
revenue
We had an
generated.
8% increase.
I don't have that information. There's certain reports that I have in the back of which tells us what we're increasing to and how much it's generating for us, keeping the millage. I don't have the information on other cities.
Okay. And then,
Commissioner, I think the slide that you saw made reference to the taxable value, the assessed
Right,
value
right.
increase year to year. So that's the 8+%,
Oh.
not the millage.
right.
It was the assessed value difference year to
Okay.
year.
Yeah, it's the one before.
Yeah, I guess I was just
There.
curious how we compared
Oh.
to other cities.
Okay, now I understand. So in taxable assessed value, how much we've
Yeah.
increased, we're pretty much right in the middle.
Okay.
There's been other cities that have increased significantly because new developments
We're-
came on.
We didn't do quite as well as we did last year, so
Last year we did
I
better.
think we're just ahead of Sweetwater and West Miami, but we're behind pretty much everyone else.
Right. And then the only other question I had, I know I saw in the recommendations the potential of adding a grant writer position or grant writer service. I think I saw maybe there was a line item in there, but there's no additional line item added for that.
It's a discussion item.
That's going to be part of the discussion.
We have it as a consideration to add a full-time position to that instead of outsourcing it. We've
Okay.
outsourced it in the fiscal year that we're in, and it's one of the things that we've talked about, that maybe we've graduated enough to do that. That would probably be in the order of magnitude, all in, salary and benefits, $85,000 and $90,000.
Okay.
So it's a top, something else discussion, but it's not built into the budget. Obviously, there is a positive net operating still within the budget, about $235,000.
Right.
And so it's something to consider and discuss.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
And if I may, just no lights at Fuchs, Commissioner, you had asked. We just verified with Parks. The volleyball did not have lights as part of the improvements.
At Fuchs and Dante Facel,
Either.
at both, correct? Okay. Apologize for stepping out, but little family emergency there. Are we done with questions on this slide, or do we want to move forward?
Have one.
Comment, okay, yes,
Yeah.
Madam Vice Mayor, recognized.
As it relates to the grant writer, can we talk to how much, based on what we have now for the outsourced grant writer, we would see kind of folding into that number you just mentioned of 80 whatever?
So the line item that we use for the outsource is 50,000 currently. The contract is not for that much. It's about 25,000, and then if we write additional ones, so roughly about 30K, but the line item itself has 50K.
Okay, so do you think it'd be fair to say that we'd want to maybe take half of that if we do decide to go towards this position, so it gives us some leeway in the future if we did want to do something outside of that position?
So if we wanted to have a combination in-house employee with some money set aside for an ability to outsource a particular grant potentially, if that's your question. Yeah, so we could use a combination of the 50, whatever portion we want to prorate, we would have to find the difference from other expenses and/or from the surplus, the net operating positive amount that we still have in the budget of about $235,000, I want to say. So
Okay.
yes, we could take some of it, all of it, of the 50K, depending if we're going to leave some money into, there may be grants that are very specialized potentially that we may want to tap somebody in the outside potentially, so yes.
Okay. And do we want to, is it me? Is my microphone low?
You sound low, yes.
Yeah. Am I still low?
Still low.
Sorry.
John, can you check on her volume, please?
Yeah, because some seem very loud and I seem very low. It's probably because I'm usually really loud. Do we want to wait until we get to parks in the overall budget conversation to have a conversation of what we saw here, or do we want to?
Yeah, I was going to let Alfredo, I'm not sure if Mr. Royals finished with his presentation. He has? Okay. I was going to open up the public hearing,
Okay,
and then we could have a conversation about discussion items that we want to raise. Let's
okay,
create a list, and then we can go through.
all right.
Okay?
Thank you.
Fair enough. Mr. Manager, anything else you'd like to add for the good of the order?
No, sir,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, sir. So at this time, we have a public hearing item on both the millage rate proposal, which is ordinance number 1 on tonight's agenda. And Mr. City Attorney, unless there's any objection from you, I'd like to open a public hearing on both items. Items 1 and 2, item 1 again being the millage rate, which we're proposing to keep flat at 3.95. The second item is the adoption of the budget, which was just summarized by our Chief Financial Officer. With that, is there any member from the public who'd like to address this commission on either items 1 or 2? You're free to come to the microphone at this time and address this commission. Madam City Attorney, is there anyone online who'd like to address this commissioner with respect to either the budget or the millage rate?
If you're online, please raise your virtual hand. We'd like to speak.
Gwen?
I'm Gretel Norweb, and what we want, I don't like to talk in public, so I'm sorry.
Not a problem. Just your name and address for the record, if you can, please.
Excuse me?
Just your name and address for the record, please.
Gretel Norweb, 7541 Southwest 61st Avenue.
Thank you, please.
We have a big concern, which is with waste. We are 6 units, building side by side, and we have garbage collectors that are driving the prices. They're driving us out completely. We pay $800 a month to have our garbage picked up. And they start very low and they increase, they lock you for years. And we want the city to take care of that. We're residents, we're not rental units. We live there. And before we had this big truck coming into the building, inside the driver, finally we managed that they don't do that anymore because they were destroying the parking area, the driveways. So we are hoping that maybe the city can consider to put us into their program and have our garbage being picked up by the city instead of paying these people such amount of money, plus all those big trucks, additional trucks, destroying our roads and polluting our roads with liquids that come out and things like that. So that's what we are requesting. Where we live is called the Enclave 2, South Miami.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Is there any other person here in the audience who'd like to address this commission on either budget item? Please come forward at this time. Seeing no further individuals coming forward, we will close the public hearing at this time. Madam Clerk, no one online as well? Okay, thank you. So we'll consider the public hearing closed. Colleagues, what items, is there a motion on item 1 that we'd like to entertain, or would you like to discuss the budget first and then take action on both items?
No, I'll move the motion to move item 1,
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt item 1 as presented?
the mill rate, yeah?
Yep, okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Kaye and a second by Commissioner Corey. Madam Clerk, I'm sorry, anything we need to read in terms of particulars on this item? My apologies.
Yes, Mayor, we're just going to announce publicly that the proposed millage rate of 3.9500, as advertised in the trim notice that property owners received, exceeds the rollback rate, which is 3.6351 by 8.66%, which statutorily is characterized as a property tax increase. We're
Okay.
just announcing that for the record.
Thank you, and we have covered the items with respect to the use of those additional revenues and completed the public hearing.
There was thorough discussion of the budget, the
Okay.
revenues, and the expenditures.
Any other formalities, Madam City Attorney, that we need to address before we? Thank you. So we have a motion and a second, item 1. Madam Clerk, then if you can call the roll, please.
Yes, Commissioner Kaye?
Madam Clerk, hold on 1 second, please. Yes, Madam Vice Mayor, you're recognized.
Thank you. How is it considered a tax increase?
Technically, under the statute, it is because the proposed millage exceeds the rollback rate by 8.66%.
Is it higher than it was last year?
No.
No. So, Madam.
The millage is
yeah.
the same, it's the rollback rate calculation. So it's the difference between the rollback rate and the new millage, a proposed millage.
So, Madam Vice Mayor, it's one of those oddities in state statute that anything that does not result in the same net revenue is considered by statute a tax increase.
Okay,
It doesn't account for the cost of CPI or any sort of other cost increases that would affect your need to have more revenue to offset those costs. But it's just, again, statutorily, any dollar over last year's collections is considered a tax increase.
so for the average homeowner like myself, who would not understand all of that legalese that was just spoken, when I look at my bill from last year and it says, whatever the percentage is, this year the percentage looks exactly the same.
Yes, our millage rate is exactly the same as
So we
last
have
year.
not raised or lowered the millage. It is just the number that has changed because the county, the state, whoever the world may be, they've changed their number. We are not changing our number.
Yes, the taxable value's increased, and so, but the assessment rate is flat, and just to contextualize it further, that's on the heels of a reduction last year.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Further questions or comments? Okay, Madam Clerk, you can now read the roll, please.
Yes, Commissioner Kaye?
Yes.
Commissioner Corey?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Fernandez?
Yes.
Item 1 passes 4-0.
Okay. Colleagues, questions you'd like to, or items you'd like to discuss in the budget? I have the comment on the waste pickup. I noted that we want to discuss a possible grant writer position. I have a discussion item I'd like to bring up on parking, staffing, and enforcement. Anything else anyone else would like to throw into the pot for discussion?
I want to bring up lobbyists.
Lobbying, okay. Other items, please?
Yes.
Madam Vice Mayor.
I also have lobbyists. I want to have an evergreen conversation for 1 second.
I want to have a what conversation? Evergreen?
Evergreen.
Okay.
Consultant, yeah.
I would like to have a parks conversation, and I have like 2 or 3 more. Do you want me to list them out?
Sure, that way I can keep a running tab.
Yep. I have,
Are there, is it specific parks or just the parks budget generally, ma'am, that you want to
no,
discuss?
it's specific. Well, one of them
Just
is,
so that since our director's online, that way he's aware of what we're going
and
to
by the way,
get him with here tonight.
very nice hat. I loved it. The $135,000 that was mentioned for cameras,
Okay,
I have $350,000 for a rescue vehicle for the police. I have.
is that in this year's budget or in the capital, it's in the capital budget for 26, ma'am?
It's projected request
Yeah, FY 26.
26, so not 25.
Okay, so I can scratch that or you still want to discuss
Scratch
it?
it. Let's see, let me keep going. Girl Scout Little House, $250,000.
Okay,
Okay, sorry, I'm just going through the whole. I think I'm done, so if somebody else wants to go, I'll keep looking, just in case.
Commissioner Corey, any items?
Yeah, just the grant writer position. I did also have a question about the citywide parks improvement for furniture. Just a general question there. And I guess a little bit on the Palmer Park master plan as it separates from the 10-year plan. Just curious about a little bit more on that, just for general discussion. But yeah.
Sure. Further items, Commissioner Kaye? We're good? Madam Vice Mayor, anything else before we close the list?
Sorry, no, I just have one more page of my notes to look at. I know, right? I have like pages and pages. I drove out real crazy. I think I'm good because somebody else already mentioned grant writer, and we already had that. Okay, I'm good. Oh, wait,
The only other-
recycle.
Recycling.
But that's on the agenda for the commission meeting this evening as well.
Okay. I'll add a 10th item, which is if we can just get, I know we saw some references to multi-agency SWAT and possibly, I think that was, you were going there with the future acquisition, so we may put the chief on the hot seat here for a minute and ask him about that initiative. Oh, we can start there if you like. So we're gonna go backwards. Let's do this. We'll do PD, we'll take up the parks issues, so we'll just do that silo and let our director off the hook. And then we'll move into some of the other items on the list. So Chief, if you could, please. Good evening. If you could just share with us what it is you're cooking up on the multi-agency SWAT. I know it's been referenced in the budget in different locations. There may be some vehicle purchases in this year and next year's budget that you've identified potentially. Wanted to understand what we're trying to accomplish there.
Yes, sir. So the multi-agency SWAT would be City of South Miami, the City of Coral Gables, the City of Pinecrest, and the City of West Miami joining in as a mutual crisis management response team for any incident that would occur within those 4 jurisdictions. It would not eliminate by any stretch the use of Miami-Dade County, but there is some concern potentially amongst chiefs right now of the transition to the sheriff's office and what that may or may not look like for us as a city or cities, I should say, in the future.
Can you elaborate on the concerns? If you could just maybe give us the background on what the state of play is today with obviously the sheriff's office being consolidated as part of the county. How do we access our SWAT services today?
Currently, we access our SWAT services with either Coral Gables, but mainly we utilize Miami-Dade County SWAT, their SRT team, for any of their special responses.
And what kind of incidents are they responding to?
This would be like a hostage barricade. Most recently, when I first got here, we had an officer shot at, and potentially the person had barricaded themselves into a home. So those are the type of incidents that we would be calling upon for the county to respond to, as well as any explosive ordnance disposal. I mean, there's a vast number of other things, but particularly related to SWAT type operations would be hostage rescue, barricaded gunmen, armed gunmen, and/or search warrants where we're believing that we may have to force entry into a home to either gather evidence or an individual.
Okay. Commissioner Kaye, you're recognized.
Thanks, Chief. So what's the concern moving forward with the sheriff's office? Like, what is it that the municipalities are worried about?
Well, there's several. One starts tomorrow at the County Board of Commissions, whereby the county had initiated, the chairperson of the commission had initiated an item on the agenda that was going to roll back the memorandum of agreement with the current cities in Miami-Dade County. And in that, there would be, we would be...
Chief, just to be clarified, because I want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Yes,
You're
sir.
talking about the discussion around the mutual aid agreement,
Yes, sir.
and I think that's driven out of a lot of the conversation related to Miami Beach's operational staffing around Memorial Day.
Correct.
Okay.
It is very much focused on Miami Beach, I would say that.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of concerns amongst the Dade chiefs, whereby I believe most will show up tomorrow at commission meeting to show presence and disagreement with rolling back that mutual aid agreement and/or a standard operating procedure that would impose fees on municipalities for utilizing Miami-Dade County services.
So for the benefit of my colleagues and the public that may not be following these conversations as closely, as I understand the item, Commissioner Gilbert, who's the county commission chairman, has expressed some displeasure about the fact that, and I'm going to characterize his comments, and maybe you'll characterize them differently, but Miami Beach, in his estimation, has been using the mutual aid agreement to basically underwrite the staffing of their operational plan for the management of Memorial Day. Obviously, the beach has had past issues with visitors on Memorial Day that have, they would say, overrun the beach in many ways. And in recent years, has been very aggressive about having a proactive policing presence. And I would say drawn upon the resources of other departments as part of their operational planning for that event. I think the chairman was fairly displeased that was coming at cost to other agencies when this was not an event that was triggered by an emergency, which I think is probably the intent of the mutual aid agreement, but one where it was just part of the proactive planning on the part of the beach to manage whatever nuisances they were trying to respond to in connection with things that happened over the course of that weekend. So the proposal, as I understood it, was to try to make sure that the mutual aid system remained one where you're responding to crisis as opposed to one where agencies are using it in a proactive manner to kind of plan and underwrite the cost of the events. Am I
Yes, sir.
summarizing the conversation fairly
Yes, sir.
accurately?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so with that as way as background, do we have any questions about that and how that system works? Well, no, I mean, I think we can, agree or disagree with what? I mean, that's the question, so, I
Whether
mean.
we agree or disagree with that characterization of,
No, I mean,
But
it's a
that-
fair,
yeah.
again, that's why I started my comment by saying it's my characterization. It may not be one that others share. So if you have a, yes, sir, go ahead.
Mayor, just want to, certainly that's been a topic of conversation, but I just want to decouple a little bit the conversation about having this regionalized effort and leveraging small agency resources and have a force multiplier predates this issue that came to the county. I mean, we started talking about this multi-agency approach of having
Yeah,
training.
I don't see the issues as linked, honestly.
Yeah.
I think they're two separate issues in my mind. One is, do you want to have your own kind of backup capacity? The question I really have is, obviously, we pay a countywide, we make a contribution to a countywide millage. I think it was 459 last time I looked at our trim notice. And so we all pay some amount of money to the county for these regional services. And I'm just wondering whether we just think that bundle of services is inadequate. So that would be really my question to the chief. And how is it inadequate? Have we had some experiences where we haven't gotten the kind of responsiveness that we needed from the county? And why would we want to create this reservoir of capacity here at the local level? Would be my question.
I would say that the county's not failed us in that regard. I would not characterize it in that manner. I would characterize it in the manner that when we don't know what we don't know regarding a new sheriff in town,
Yeah.
so to speak, and what that may or may not look like depending on who were to step in office at the time. And if I called upon a sheriff, police department, SWAT team to come out to the city of South Miami and they took over complete operations and the operations didn't go as well as we would hoped, the news media is going to be standing on our front door and probably not theirs. And I want to be able to I want to be able to have a final say in my city.
So again, colleagues, I don't want to dominate the conversation. Any questions? Yes, Madam Vice Mayor, and then we'll go to Commissioner Corey.
I have a concern about how this would play out liability-wise when you've got different municipalities forming an intergovernmental agency, for lack of the right word. If you have Pinecrest, Coral Gables, and South Miami responding to something and something goes wrong, my worry is, above and beyond whatever the hard cost would be to the city, is now who's responsible for whatever that liability is. And I certainly don't have the clarity when it comes to that to make me comfortable with this. I'm the first one, I mean, I tell the story that,
Can I just,
I-
not to interrupt, but,
Yeah.
so is your question, so I understand, let's just say we're responding to a barricaded shooter
Here.
here in South Miami or in another jurisdiction that's subject to this mutual aid agreement, and there's an innocent bystander that's shot, and there's a lawsuit that flows
Who's-
from that response, who's defending and who's paying that claim?
Mhm.
Maybe the chief can help address that question specifically, or share some background with the help of our city attorney.
I'm going to defer to the city attorney to explain that a little bit better than I might be able to.
I'll let him chime in, but I just want to share that we have that today, right? We provide mutual aid to other agencies. So those scenarios are real today because we have, borders that cross and
Sure,
we
people,
respond into the county.
or there's
so-
there's an active chase, and obviously you're
Yeah.
responding across jurisdiction, so
Yeah.
what
We
you're
don't
saying
have-
is that what you're saying is the creation of this entity will not necessarily change the posture of how we respond to those claims and that liability. However, I think it would then put us in a realm where we're dealing and we're responding to different incidents without the benefit of a sister agency, like the county, taking the lead on that response.
Yeah,
Is that a fair?
And
the
do we
exposure is
actively,
there.
and do we actively chase anybody today?
We do, yeah.
yeah,
Do we, though?
We may.
But do we? Do we actively chase today?
Yes, we absolutely chase for certain crimes. So violent crimes, we will chase you for.
Okay, hit and run, we chase you for.
That's not a violent crime.
Okay,
No, but violent crimes like armed robbery, we will chase you.
okay, so I think it would behoove us to understand, at least me, what we would chase for and what we wouldn't chase for, because if I got smacked up in a hit and run, I want you to chase somebody down, and knowing now that
We're
that's
gonna
not
dig- So I think there's a difference between active pursuit and an investigation that follows from the
Yeah,
accident.
and-
So we would investigate and then pursue the person, but you wouldn't have an active,
we wouldn't chase somebody down. for a hit
yeah,
and run.
correct. But that doesn't mean that that person doesn't get flagged on an LPR reader, right, in another jurisdiction, and that jurisdiction does not try to apprehend that person when they're,
Okay, sorry. I'm
Evading the
moving
scene of the crime,
into
yeah.
something completely different.
Yeah.
But this is a little worrying to me.
Yeah,
Both the action and the money, because the money, $350,000 is a significant amount of money.
so the
Hi, Josh.
the $350,000 is slotted for fiscal year '26, which will be another year, and that was a sort of a placeholder for a discussion for next fiscal year, not the one that we're putting in, but the one after that, potentially, and to have that capability possibly. The actual operation of it would predate that, right? Because that vehicle purchase. So the liabilities exist today, and I just want to share that inherent in the way they operate and the way the cities collaborate, and if there's a chase in the Gables and they call it in and they're coming into South Miami, we get involved in that. Or if the county comes in from a SWAT standpoint, and they do something in our city, that liability is there as well. So it's inherent in the business is what I want to say. It's a proper question as to the liability that we have, but that exposure we have in that operation because we share.
so let me do this if I may, because in the interest of time, we're at 5:45, and this is the first of 10 discussion items I have, and we probably have not had a chance to all be briefed by the chief on this issue. So I certainly would like to get some more information about what the costs are to stand up this capacity, what we think the expenditures are going to be to stand that up over the next 3 years, what kind of capital outlays we have to make beyond the ones that we have in FY '26 identified. And Chief, I know, these things are just often tough to discuss in public as well. I'd like to understand, since I know I'm involved in actively endorsing one of the candidates, right? Are there concerns about things we've heard? We can talk about the stuff line from any one of the candidates that are now among the two left for that office that are creating concerns about the current status quo. Certainly something I want to be at least advised of. So if you can put together that information for us on the quantitative side, I know I would appreciate it. Colleagues, is there anything else you would want to know about this particular item?
Sorry.
Yes,
Mr.
sir, go
Mayor.
ahead.
Is this all or nothing? So do you need all 4 municipalities to join to make sure this works? Or what if Coral Gables or Pinecrest goes through the commission, they don't want to do it?
We've already been to this, and we've signed it. It's already been to commission for all this.
We have
As far as As far as
The
the
agreement.
agreement.
We have mutual aid
Not
agreements
as far
already.
as financially
Mhm.
obligated anything.
We have mutual aid agreements with all
Yeah,
three of these
course.
jurisdictions.
No, I know that, but for,
The SWAT capacity you're
Correct,
asking,
that's what I'm
correct. I think what I heard the chief say is that Coral Gables already has SWAT as part of their portfolio. So this is additive to us, I'm assuming additive to Pinecrest and additive to West Miami. So if you can help also explain, what role we would play and if there was an event, who would have incident command control, to your point before?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
at this point, we're sponsoring 3 people for this SWAT team at this point, right? So they will go over and be trained as a mutual aid team. As far as incident command, it's going to depend on which city the incident occurs in.
Okay,
So if it occurs in South Miami, I'll have incident command. If it occurs in Coral Gables will have incident command, and so forth and so on. That was the whole point and premise behind this, was that if we called upon a SWAT team, we want to be able to, as chiefs, dictate whether we walk away from that incident or whether we push forward and continue the incident. If we turn it over to the county, and this new sheriff comes in, so to speak, and decides to take it over and takes full incident command, they are the decision-making authority. Could be unilaterally, could not be a unified command, and we just don't know what we don't know at this point.
okay. And we do not have a mutual aid agreement with the county today that governs that relationship?
no, we do.
We do have a mutual aid
Your concern
agreement.
is what happens to it once the new chief comes into place, but
4 months from now, we don't
that
know.
agreement would have to be modified. Okay.
We all know that the mutual aid agreement is
So
going to be modified.
I think I'd like to understand the costs, the time it takes to stand this capacity up, because obviously that's going to happen here in the next 60 days or 65 days or so. So those details would be appreciated before, certainly the next budget hearing, if we can, on 9/17.
Yes, sir.
Anything else, colleagues, that you want from the chief on this item? Okay, then, thank you, sir, we'll move on.
Yes, Chief.
Appreciate it. Let's talk about the parks item. I had a few in that category: Palmer Park Master Plan, citywide park furniture acquisition, cameras. Anything else I missed, colleagues, on parks items? Okay, do we want to include the Girl Scout Little House in the parks category as well? Okay. So, Mr. Manager, do you want to take any one of those items first?
Yeah, I'll take the Palmer Park one and the
Okay.
citywide master plan, and
Sure.
I think
It wasn't
there's,
the citywide master plan, it was a question regarding citywide park furniture acquisition.
Yeah.
Correct, Commissioner
Right,
Corey?
that one and Palmer Park.
And Palmer
Yeah.
Park as the separate item, yeah.
a separate master plan,
Yeah.
and so I'm dealing with the master plan question, and I'll turn over the other questions. The master plan, obviously, is a 10-year master plan, and that's a citywide that will address, programming and what do we need as a system looking 10 years forward and given on the city and any growth, what have you. The Palmer one, given the sports-oriented nature of that facility, it was a conversation about, is there an ability to reorient and take a look how it's currently laid out and used and see if there's a way to maximize the space. We've started conversations with the school system, the mayor, and I had a meeting with the superintendent about potential joint use facilities to leverage each other's properties, possibly during off hours. So the Palmer Park would be very centric to the operations and layout and design of that facility. The citywide is just all our operations, all our facilities.
Right.
So I just wanted to explain the difference.
And Mayor, if I may.
You may.
And the separation of it was to expedite and to address the unique concerns of the interlocal agreements. Or
So let me jump on that one. A parks master plan is looking at your inventory, taking an assessment of what people want to see by way of services, what we have today, what they want to see prospectively. I don't know that it necessarily delves into the site planning or master planning of any one asset. And so in this case, we had talked about spending money on lighting and laser grading fields, and, I've talked to a number of parents there. The facility hasn't really had any real investment in the last 40 years, and by my estimation, its layout is pretty obsolete when you look at, the sports that are actively being played there today and how those facilities are configured elsewhere in Miami-Dade County or beyond. So there are the opportunities to maximize our existing footprint, just what we control and own. I think give that park a very different aesthetic in terms of your arrival experience, which you end up arriving into a lot of the back of house storage areas when you're parking and/or or walking into the park. And I think there's also the possibility, and the school system seems interested in, we've got 2 campuses that are adjacent to that facility that have basketball stanchions and surplus space that potentially could also be programmed in conjunction with Palmer Park. So to expand the scope of offerings, right? One example I'll give you in talking to folks who run the Gray Ghost program or parents, there's been a desire there to also connect to the school and maybe have some after-school academic component to the football program. And so getting access to the adjacent classrooms in one of those 2 facilities could be part of that conversation. But I really think that this park, the intention of this discrete master plan is to look at how to optimize that facility, both standalone, right, and with a prospect towards a possible joint use facility agreement with the school board, if that ever comes to fruition.
Right. And maybe incorporating that parking we were talking about at
The
the.
adjacent parking, correct, right?
All right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
As it relates to the other individual items, I'll let Parks chime in on, I guess you want to tackle first furniture and parks. Commissioner Corey, you had a question on?
Yeah, I guess I was just curious what the, always with placemaking furniture, things like that, while we're in the middle of this study, what that plan entails in terms of what we're going to be doing prior to that can also be continuous into our study.
Let our Parks Director jump in.
Good evening. So while we're going through the 10-year master plan, as the mayor stated, part of that plan is to look at inventory. If you go throughout our parks today, we have different furniture at every particular site. So this whole capital improvement plan is just to simply standardize our furniture from the trash receptacle and benches and picnic tables to the various benches throughout our park system. I would like for us to have a, some sort of unique look to our parks when it comes to our furniture, and that's the purpose of the standardizing our furniture throughout our park system. We also have some sites that need more benches, that need more picnic tables. So rather than go out and getting these things individually, the idea is to take advantage of this 10-year master plan, look at our inventory, let's come up with a standard that represents our city, represents our park system, and create that throughout our park system moving forward.
Questions of the director, Madam Vice Mayor.
First of all, Mr. Webster, can we turn that down just a little bit? Thank you. When you're looking at the park's furniture and all of that, are you looking at it so that we don't end up with people sleeping all over our parks?
Absolutely. The goal is to, implement vagrant deterrents within, our park furniture. That's the benches, things of that magnitude. So yes, we were also looking at those particular things as well.
Thank you.
While coming up with a very unique identity to our park system. So yes, Madam Vice Mayor.
Commissioner Corey, you're recognized.
Yeah, are we able in any way, shape, or form to integrate a little bit with Pluserbia and the information that they've extracted from residents on, the future look of the city, since it's going to expand out from?
Yeah, I want to build on that comment and say, I know we're also in the process of retaining a landscape architecture firm as well. I think to the director's comment and likely direction, what I would like to see us do is have, again, we don't need to be Coral Gables, but I think we can learn a little bit about how they kind of are curating the aesthetic of their city. If you go to all their parks or all the recent parks, they all have similar elements, right? The benches, et cetera, the use of certain new light stone, fencing, from park to park, it's all the same. And to your point, Commissioner Corey, begins to brand the city. So I don't know if there's a way, Mr. Manager, for us to connect this landscape resource we're bringing on board with Pluserbia and put them at the disposal of Mr. Puso when we think about procuring these elements. Maybe it comes back to us and we can select from a couple of options and make sure that they're kind of, again, helping to brand the aesthetic of the city so that you're entering into South Miami. It's a special place and has like kind of a uniform aesthetic. Is that your comment?
Yep.
Okay. Further questions about that item? I think we had a question about the cameras, Madam Vice Mayor.
I think I had this same question or comment last time. I just don't understand spending $135,000 on cameras for a parks that nobody is monitoring in the hopes that if something happens, we can kind of go back to it. And crossing our fingers that seeing a camera is going to force better behavior. I just think it's a lot of money on something. We could use it for so many things that doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know if I stand alone on that because I'm not a big, like, my kids didn't grow up in parks. So I'm looking to you guys because your kids have. So I see $135,000 for that, and that seems like out of control to me.
So I think question maybe to staff on how they think the technology would be helpful, and maybe our police chief can also speak to the benefit of having cameras in these public spaces from both a crime response and deterrence perspective. I would imagine if there's an incident about a theft or a child is taken from a park, having video that's concurrent with window would be helpful. But I don't want to play.
Yeah.
I don't want to play police chief or parks director.
Yeah, because that's
from here.
that's extreme. But like, I just think of like the Ring camera, where my best friend Bridget, like when they broke into her house, yeah, she had the Ring camera, and guess what the guy was doing in the Ring camera?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, now what?
So I don't know if staff, Mr. Director or police chief, if you want to address the possible benefits of such an expenditure. Yeah.
Well, obviously, the addition of cameras, from a security standpoint, there is a deterrence factor there. How do you measure that? I don't know how you measure the deterrence factor. However, being the victim of a crime myself today, having that camera footage was fantastic. So it is populated through Nextdoor and several other social media sites, whereby I'm hopeful that there will be a apprehension soon to come based off of that footage. So I'm a very much a supporter of the camera system today.
Look, I think that sorry.
Can we hear from I don't know, Mr. Director, did you want to add anything? Quentin?
Well, he's trying to get back in.
He's trying to get back in. Okay. Sorry, Commissioners, before we.
That's okay.
Quentin, did you want to share any thoughts on why you think spending the money proposed on cameras is advisable? Mr. Director, can you hear me?
I'll jump in the interim while he's trying to connect, Quentin, if you could hear us. But so, similar approach at the garage, right? The garage added a number of cameras that hopefully act as a deterrent, and we have used it to go back and take a look at things that have happened so we can take some corrective action. Being monitored would be the greatest, right? But realistically, the ability to monitor all those cameras real time is actually something that Coral Gables has, where they have a real crime center with a room that has all these monitors. But in the interim, there are elements of cameras being around that do help deter, and we've been able to use it to follow up and find out what's going on. In the garage, we've seen a downtick of certain activity that we were seeing before because those individuals realized that they're on camera. And so we've seen a reduction in some of the activity that we were dealing with before. So I think those were the general premises that kind of led us to. And I don't know, Quentin, if you're back on, can you hear us and can you jump in from a park standpoint?
Yes, I can hear you, Manager. We currently have cameras at Marshall, the community center, and at the pool. And when something happens, it allows us the opportunity to go back and provide further information to police. If we just simply rely on eyewitnesses, we're not always successful. Over the past year, we had 19 different calls to Palmer Park. And I will admit, witnesses haven't been very reliable. Palmer Park actually led the number of calls that we had to police outside of Murray Park. So by incorporating cameras at both Palmer Park and South Miami Park, which have heavy foot traffic, I think it's the best thing we can do. We're not necessarily monitoring activity, but it does allow us to provide information, some corrective action, and it does deter things from happening. So the cameras are, I think, the way to go here.
I'll add one comment just to that as well, is we do have the cameras inside of our dispatch center. So there's an ability to access those cameras when we respond to a call for service. So there is that ability to pull over the cameras and direct officers where to go.
Thank you for that.
Mayor-
Commissioner Levy,
sorry,
you're recognized.
Sorry, Chief, if you don't mind, and you may not take maybe, but I think it's directed to you, maybe our Parks Director will take this. So obviously, it's it's debatable, but we can argue it's a deterrent. But I've also questioned sometimes when we're coming up with solutions, are these solution for existing problems or? So will you give me an example? I know, Mr. Director, you said there's, I don't know if this is for the chief, that there are, did you say 17 or, I don't know if you quantified that. You give me an example of what happens where we would need the camera? Just to justify the expense?
I can give you one, Commissioner. I mean, I think we recently, last year, we had an incident regarding an alleged assault by a parent at a football game with a fire extinguisher, some kids. Would have been helpful if there was video of that incident to kind of ascertain what the actual facts were. That was an alleged, one team that was visiting was alleging that parents were targeting their kids with the use of the fire extinguishers and forcing them to inhale smoke, like the fire repressant or fire suppression chemicals. So we've had, I'm assuming fights and disputes between parents are probably among the more typical calls you're going to get to Palmer Park, but I'll let the director elaborate further.
Thank you.
Mr. Director, you are on mute, it looks like.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect. So yes, we've had calls regarding fighting amongst parents. We've had calls regarding traffic accidents. We had some traffic details related calls, various different disturbances. There were a couple of burglary incidents and suspicious vehicle incidents at Palmer Park, just to name a few.
But, yeah, sorry, and we're talking about parks, when I think of this, park safety, right? Turn from parents fighting, which is just ridiculous, but I don't really get the traffic accidents. I mean, to me, it's,
Yeah, that could just simply be someone backed out of a parking
Right.
space and may have hit another car.
oh, yeah, sorry.
That's probably one or two of those calls that came in.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, to me, traffic, it's just, I don't know if it necessarily justifies, right, the expense to help us correct someone back into someone's car. Parents are fighting that, that's a whole nother issue. I mean, we don't even allow fire extinguishers in the park, so that's the question. Why were they there to begin with? Right? Again, this is a solution? Is there an existing problem? That's what I want to know. I don't, cars backing into each other, allowing parents to bring in fire extinguishers and spray kids when they're not even allowed in the park to begin with.
Well, those are the kind of complaints, I think, to your the question of whether we respond to them this way or some other way with, we're not going to have active staffing in all of our parks. That's certainly a more cost prohibitive recurring expense than the expenditure on passive cameras, but options for us to consider. Chief, thank you. Mr. Director, thank you. I think we had a question on the Girl Scout Little House, Madam Vice Mayor. You want to discuss that item as well?
Yes, we recently had a meeting where different alternatives were discussed, and based on that, I don't know that we need to keep that amount of money in there. I think that should be lowered. I just don't think that that's a responsible amount of money to be earmarking for something that may or may not be our responsibility.
Through the mayor.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, I'm not privileged to the information of the meetings. Can you?
So while you recognize the manager to maybe give us some background on some of the recent conversations. Sir, you're
Yeah.
recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. The Vice Mayor was mentioning a meeting that we had. We've been talking to the CEO of the Girl Scouts, and then we had a county representative from their environmental program, biologist who deals with invasives and has dealt with other cleanups. Vice Mayor was part of that call, whereby he was willing to connect us to other state resources for certain plant material that they may want to eradicate, and then identifying contractors, we would still have particular costs potentially on removing some of the invasives, not all of think, not, so I think the Brazilian pepper was the one that he was talking about that the state is, yeah, they were funding potentially, so a portion of those are in that site. It is a rock pineland. It is, on their list. So what we don't know yet is the extent of the expense, and that's where I'm uncomfortable not having any money for it, because we don't know if the state is going to say yes or no, and then we have not obtained a quote from the contractor that the gentleman from the county had recommended, who's done some work at county parks. The issue of, I think you had mentioned, whose responsibility is it? That's going to be a conversation, I guess, whether we're going to say, well, that's the leaseholder is responsibility, and we're going to hold tight on that, or we, the city, are going to come in. I can tell you the CEO has said they don't have the funds to do that. They have some technical knowledge. They are bringing some ideas to the table, but as it relates to funds to remove the exotics and the invasives, she has said that they do not. So I worry it's a timing thing. We may not need that much, but we just don't know how much yet, right? That's the window of time that we're in.
Can I just ask a clarifying question, and I'll recognize you again? We are having conversations with them about possibly changing the use arrangement, because that was a concern of the board as well. And are they open to
Yes.
revisiting the arrangement today?
Correct.
Okay, so
Yes, and that's part of the conversation. This was just one of the subsets of conversations,
So
was the issue of
just for the
invasive.
record, yes, that they're open to having a conversations around a lease modification?
Yes,
And secondly, changing the use, there's a better use balance, so they will retain some use, but there'll be additional public use potentially in such a
Yes.
modified scenario. Okay.
yes.
And just to clarify again, the dollars that you have in the budget are simply for the restoration of the Pine Rockland, correct?
So we had some funds to do an assessment, and then some funds for removal. As part of the conversation that the Vice Mayor was a part of, the county representative said that Fairchild has submitted an application for that site. You don't have to be an owner of a site for the environmentally endangered lands program. And as a result of that, they had done an inventory. So he says you can share in that information and maybe reducing that from being a cost for us to have to do an inventory. So the money was both for assessment and for removal.
Understood. So potentially, there's, in terms of just addressing the inventorying and the removal of invasives, the cost may be less, but that money is not for broader improvements to fencing, access, the perimeter of the park, streetscape, et cetera, which is something else I know we had discussed. So I guess to your question, it sounds like we don't need all the money for the earmark purpose. Should we expand the purpose for that money and keep the same amount would be kind of my question to the board as well.
What I would suggest is for us to, at the very least, halve that and move half of that into other things that would benefit the city if we are looking at the parking lot or we're looking at the surrounding area, which I had mentioned is some parts of it are not in good shape. You know, because I understand the plight of the Girl Scouts. I understand the whole thing. I also understand that, dubious at best, we have not been tasked with maintaining that. We have not. I understand they do not have the money. That being said, I would not run into being the one to repair their problem without first having a very clear understanding of where we would benefit from that. So we cannot put the cart before the horse in the hopes that the horse will show up. And so I think they were extremely forthcoming, very helpful. There is a willingness to do all of that. I just think that putting that money into the budget essentially is highlighting a willingness that I do not feel.
Through the mayor.
Yes, sir, you're recognized.
And I agree with a lot of the things you said. The good thing about us and just allocating money to it, it's not a finite number, right? We just allocate to the budget. When that time comes, after we've hopefully negotiated and gotten to see what the city's gonna get in return, then we can go ahead and approve those funds to actually be released. So it's not really the, horse before the cart, or it's just allocating the funds there that we have available. If we don't use it, then, you know, we can move it. If we need more because we want to do more with it and we've gotten something in return, then we can allocate that as well.
So I just want to build on both of your points, which is, I think you're concerned that in having 250 for this limited purpose, we're signaling we're going to solve your problem, right? And I do recognize what you're saying, which is just because we encumber the money doesn't mean we have to spend it all, right? We tend to do that. I don't disagree, and I'm concerned about the signaling effect. So my question to the both of you is, would you both be more comfortable with keeping the same amount but expanding the scope? So that's money that then can be used for enhancements to that area just to the west, right, to improve the natural condition of the parking area, repair the sidewalks surrounding the property, fencing, things that would enhance the aesthetic. If we did nothing to the interior, could enhance the, let's assume conversations with the Girl Scouts break down completely. Would we still want to have some money in the budget to improve the exterior condition and aesthetic of that area?
I want to know what you think and what
Sure.
Commissioner Corey thinks.
Commissioner Liebman and then Commissioner Corey.
Yes, I'm going to say the same thing I've said previously. If we're going to put in any money, we should put the money into the parking lot, and that's mutually beneficial. It's simple, it's on the exterior. There's a shortage of parking for the facilities at Palmer Park, and now you're talking about completely transforming those facilities, which will create more demand. So I'd start there. And it will also benefit the Girl Scouts. It'll give them more exposure, it'll give them a proper parking lot, and then we still have to figure out who's going to take the weed eater to that easement, setback, whatever you want to refer to that as, the swale.
Okay. Commissioner Corey?
I've always considered this item connected, like if we were going to go in there and remove the invasives and improve the property, that would come in exchange for some kind of like public access to it. So that's why I was thinking if we were going to expand the scope, maybe not be so exterior on the expansion as much as could be something that allows us to take steps toward opening that park to the public if that were parts of it, if that were a possibility.
Mr. Manager, you wanted to add something to the
Yeah,
conversation?
just if I could suggest something maybe. So our next step subsequent to that was to get the contractor that the county has suggested has done a similar work to give us a quote. So we have now, if we can take care of Brazilian pepper through the state, hopefully, that's not a guarantee. And then we have a quote from the contractor, we'll be in a better position to see, okay, how much money are we really talking about? And so maybe this could be a second hearing. We can do that homework, bring that information back, potentially, and then bring that information, and then you have one more piece of information that we're trying to obtain regardless. So that's our next step, would be to get that quote.
Through the mayor.
Yes, Commissioner Kaye.
So, you know, to Commissioner Liebman's comments about the parking, do we have an estimated budget of what it would take to fix up that particular parking lot and make it accessible, visually appealing, et cetera?
No, we have not pursued that as a project.
Okay.
But I don't think we have a definitive cost on the cost of eradicating the invasive. So again, my thought was, let's just make this a line item that addresses all potential aspects. So we're not just signaling to the Girl Scouts, we're going to solve your problem,
I'm okay with
but
it.
speaks to
Right.
the broader ambition, and we can use the money however we decide. You know, in the state budget, this issue's more easily solved because we have proviso or implementing bill language that says how money can be used if you want to limit it that way. We don't really have that mechanism here. So I would just say we modify the description of the line item if that's amenable to everyone. Okay? Okay. I think the Vice Mayor had questions regarding the Evergreen study and its implementation. Did you want to ask those of the manager, Madam Vice Mayor?
Yes, I have more a question than anything else because I see it obviously throughout the budget, and they did a very good job of explaining it to me. I just wonder, when it's being rolled out throughout the city, is an explanation being done employee to employee? Because as humans, we all talk, right? And let's be real, there's no such thing as I'm not telling you what I'm making and you're not telling me what you're making. And when you and I are doing the same thing and you're getting a raise and I'm not, is there some kind of conversation going on that is explaining the whys of this? I don't know, it just popped into my head.
Yeah, Vice Mayor, we we hosted 2 town halls with employees. I believe it was 2. two town halls with employees, where the employees came and we had a consultant and staff, and explained why the study, the methodology, what was its purpose, globally, right? Because we didn't get into individual employees' situation, just not an appropriate setting to do that.
Yeah.
So the study itself in the budget has recommended increases based on the recommendations. As it relates to individual employees, depending on what the commission does from a budget standpoint, then we could explain to employees, hey, Chip, you know, in your particular case, the competitive benchmarking info stated the following, but we haven't done that on an individual basis because we don't know what the commission is going to support from a funding standpoint. So we held it globally to explain it so they would understand what was the purpose of the study, how it was done, and we had 2 sessions here in the last 2 weeks.
Okay, if it passes and everything moves forward, will the employees will they have the ability to come and speak, and I don't know who that person would be, to have that conversation? If they're having questions, are uncomfortable, whatever, will there be somebody that they can talk to?
Definitely. I'd be honest with you, part and parcel of this approach was to have a structure and a system, and that was, you know, competitive in nature. And the second part of it is transparency, employees understanding, you know, what is the pay classification, what is our strategy for pay. So part of that compensation clarity and transparency is sharing with the employees. Now, they may not necessarily, they may think that they have an increase coming and they're not because the numbers don't support it.
Yeah.
And we would explain that. Not everybody's going to walk away happy necessarily, but I think it was, at least it would be clear to them. And that is the second part of this equation, which is transparency.
Yeah, because I think that's going to be really important
Yes,
for them,
I agree.
because we don't want people, you know, unhappy.
agree.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Madam Vice Mayor, all good there?
Yes.
Move on? Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we've got 4 items left. I'd like to try to do them in 20 minutes at most. I'm going to try and take hopefully two easy ones that I put on the list. One is on the, Mr. Manager, the issue of waste pickup for smaller multifamily properties. I don't think we have a long conversation, but we've had one member of the public, I've gotten a couple emails and had a number of conversations. If there's a way for us to address this in the budget so we have the cost reflected, I'd like to figure out whether, I'm not sure what the threshold is today that we're using in terms of our standard, but certainly I would say buildings with less than 10 units, whether they're rental or condominium, maybe we can bring into our residential disposition program. I don't know how that would work for bulk waste, but at least on the resi side, as a minimum, if we could bring back some clarification at the next meeting about incorporating them into our program, I'd appreciate it. I don't know that we'd have a huge conversation about it, unless someone has any questions or wants to add something to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
through the mayor, just wanted to add, I think that we just need an understanding policy-wise, if we need to make a change, whether it's resi or
Or an ordinance.
requirements, like what is it the code says that we maybe need to modify? So we can work on that.
Mr. City Attorney, you've got some information, it sounds
Yeah,
like,
so-
or looks like.
So, yeah, Mr. Iglesias had warned me that this might come up. So the threshold is 4
Okay.
right now. Anything more than 4 units is considered a commercial residential structure and is required to have a city franchise.
Agreement.
Franchised operator
Sure.
doing the pickup. So that could change depending on the costs, if that was this
Okay.
commission's will.
In
If you
addressing some of these concerns that have been brought up before, like today and previously, I think there were some inconsistencies that we want to get clarification as to what exactly is the city threshold for whenever that was passed and created, so we understand what that is, and then we can deal with it.
Okay.
And that was an email today for that research. So I think we'll huddle up after this budget hearing and come back with some ideas or recommendation on that.
Okay. Commissioner Lieben.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the threshold, I know it's been stated, is 4 units. If we decide to relax that, whatever that threshold is, can we limit it to condos as opposed to,
So that's a question I would put to the city attorney. I don't know if can we distinguish between
you know,
resident ownership versus non-ownership?
we could do that by folio. If it has 1 folio, it's an apartment or,
We don't presently do that, but we could certainly do that.
okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So I
Do
think
relax it? I'd prefer for condos rather than apartments.
I have no objections as one is commercial, typically more commercial in nature than the other, so,
And commercials
And
understood.
I would want to provide a little bit of situational awareness as to what we actually are doing now.
I would appreciate the background of where we are and the implications of a policy change if we went to something like 10 units that incorporated commercial condos, so we understand what the budgetary impact is. If you can bring that back to us for the next budget hearing, we'd appreciate it. And Mr. City Attorney, to the extent that we need to modify an existing ordinance, if you can just draft up a proposed modification, I'm happy to serve as a sponsor. Okay. Madam Vice Mayor, you're recognized.
And also what that would physically look like. Okay, because she actually made a comment that stuck with me is they had a big truck coming through and it messed everything up. But we also have a big truck that would come through. So what would that look like? Would it become vis-a-vis the Gables where you have somebody running through all of a sudden? So when we take all of that into account, we have to see what that's going to look like. Thanks.
Excellent point. We had actually discussed it with them that they could actually store and roll out their individual containers. So, yeah, correct. Yeah, okay. Further questions or comments, colleagues, on that? Okay. So moving along then, I have, let's see, you guys want to take up the grant writer position next?
Well, I think what I was going to propose to the commission is we currently have, I'm going to suggest grant writer and lobby team.
Okay.
So currently we have $100,000 allocated to state lobbying and $35,000 to government, DC
Federal.
lobbying.
Yeah.
So with the grant opportunities that we have right now, and by the way, from a state level perspective, they're pushing us. We got vetoed a lot of the money we're allocating because they want us to start going to some grant opportunities and stuff like that. So I definitely think that we need to invest in a grant writer, and I think the way that we should pay for that is eliminate one of the lobbyists. So we go ahead and rebid it up at $50,000, so we save $50,000 from the budget, and then and I obviously allocate what we already had in the budget for a grant writer consultant and just put it into the staff member.
So, yes, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have a suggestion for you.
For all of us.
Yes, for everybody. I would suggest that we maybe leave the money where it is, seeing as we have a contingency right now. Leave it where it is. You know, put out a solicitation, see if we can save some money, but leave a little bit of a contingency because we never know where we find ourselves later, right? Further on down the thing, I absolutely agree with the grant writer position. As a matter of fact, I was discussing that earlier with our city manager as it relates to the TPO and the different alternatives we have when it comes to grant writing. So I agree with the idea. We saw some, you know, we've had some successes with the lobbyists and the two of them, but I think it would be good to put it out there, see if we can save a little bit, ask for registered clients, what did you raise, for who be the lead, you know, get as much information as we can. It's coming up. And by the way, thank you, Chip, for sending that to me earlier. It's coming up for contract at the end of this month. So it's something we would want to jump on so that we could make a decision sooner versus later.
I do support the grant writing position. Again, it's a revenue generating position. I think even in the first year or two, I think we're likely to make our money back on that.
So I wanted to bifurcate my thoughts on this, and because I have some questions on grant writing. One is, I think, on the lobbying, while, you know, the truest thing you can say about Tallahassee is things are always changing. And so, you know, the incoming Senate president's position with respect to water projects, right? He's probably at the point where he'll have for another year the most influence you'll have in shepherding that policy through between now and the end of that first session in his term. And it's like sand through an hourglass thereafter in that process in terms of his influence on pushing that policy on a going forward basis. You know, my suspicion based on how DEP's program works today is that South Florida communities are going to fare very badly in that grant writing process. I think of the 40 awards that were in fiscal year 23, I think there was one awarded to all of South Florida. So, you know, I think you're probably going to see a lot of the need for putting some pressure on policymakers to either change the rules, force DEP to reevaluate its criteria for awarding projects, which is going to require the help of a lobby team, certainly, or, push to go back to an appropriations balanced process, right? So that communities can see dollars come back to them for priority needs. That's my strong suspicion as an observer of the process. And so I think, I do agree that, we have a contract coming up. The last time we talked about the federal contract, I wanted to put them both out or extend both of them, since we had success in equal measures at both levels, at least on the appropriations side. Unfortunately, at the state side, $3.5 million was vetoed, or just about, by the governor, that would have benefited this community. So that's point one. I'm happy to support direction to the manager to bring back a solicitation or issue a solicitation for those contract services. On the grant writer position, I have a couple questions, or a number of questions. Number one is, bringing in another staff position entails, substantial recurring costs. And also, positions tend to also get the benefit of being pensionable over time, so there are lots of legacy costs with that. I don't know how many grants we're writing today. I don't know how many grants we expect to write, but
I think we're up to 12.
so, I don't know that, 12 or even 24 grants. I would want to see someone writing the equivalent of, a grant at least one every 2 weeks, right, before I wanted to internalize that cost. So I don't want to understand what our goal is going to be before I commit to a full-time staff person. I certainly have no problem allocating that same amount of money to, authorizing a consultant to provide us more support in providing the preparation of grants, because I think that's a good investment on return. I don't know that I'm ready to commit to a full-time staff position for that reason, if no other reason.
Through the mayor?
Yes, sir, you recognize.
I think the only problem that I have with doing that and just keeping it outsourced is that we don't have control. I think we have the opportunity to really expand it and do something well with it. I think the return on investment, yes, it's something we're going to have to cover in-house, but the return on investment on some of the things that we could get, there's a lot of grants out there that, as the last couple of months I've gotten into it, there's just a lot of money out there, and we're not doing a really good job of trying to go get it. So, and the benefit of the city, I think that we really do need to invest in.
Well, I think I've learned being here is that someone needs to own that process.
Agreed.
And because we've had a couple fall through the cracks in multiple years. And so I would suggest maybe, I know we have this administrative services coordinator position. I don't know, Mr. Manager, is there something we can add to that portfolio so that it's one position with this as an adjunct suite of activities for the moment, as opposed to just, maybe we elevate the pay and profile of that person? So it's someone that's got a balance of skill sets. I'm hard pressed to want to commit to that one extra position. Commissioner Liebman, yeah, that's fine.
Yes, while there is a lot of money out there, it is a very competitive process, and truth is, well, South Miami is much more marketable than it was previously, right? It's not as marketable in terms of grants, because we're not as diverse, and we're not as low income as we once were, which makes South Miami previously a better candidate for grants. So the demographics, right, and the income of the community's changed. So it's something we should take into account when we're considering how marketable the city is for grants as well.
Madam Vice Mayor, you had a comment?
Something to consider that our CFO had mentioned was taking one of our finance positions and what the grant writer had brought in to have one of his team be the one that kept on top of it and made sure we hit all the benchmarks. I know you could explain it a lot better than I can if you want to do that, because I think I'm botching it. But maybe it's a combination of all of these things that are being talked about.
Now, I'll
I
share a
think
little bit
that's-
on the, certainly let the CFO chime in on that, but there's a victim of your success, right? As you write more grants, there's a lot of work to support those grants, a lot of paperwork, reporting, and that's where A exceeds, maybe our skill set and or capability given our staffing, right? So there's that aspect of the grant management after you chase it. The other aspect potentially from a value added would be that there are folks that really have a good handle on the landscape of grants throughout across municipalities, and really, writing it is one aspect, but understanding where to go is the other aspect, and that's where we broaden our game, or we're looking at, for example, federal lobbyists will forward us a lot of federal grants that are out there. So Alfredo has been made point on this program for right now, and he coordinates with our outsource. So the outsourcing aspect is the mechanics of writing it, but, who's advising us, the internal advisor as to the opportunity. So there are positives and values that certainly, may pay for itself, but even if you outsource it, the managing of and keeping up with those grants is a lot of work. And I can tell you, Exceeds right now dealing with an EPA one, right, for our septic to sewer. So I bring that component in because that gets lost a little bit in the work, and somebody has to be able to do that work as well. So there are different ways of going about it. I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer, but the issue is, have we graduated? We're creating a program, right, and we've crawled to outsourcing, now finance overseeing it. Have we graduated enough to now have somebody internally that could be our advisor and has that skill set potentially? And so, we may be. I tell you, if we did it next year, it's not a wrong answer. If we did it this year, that's not necessarily. So there's an opportunity, and we may be able to start doing it now. So I want to bring in the grant management aspect because that's a lot of work. And that's, Vice Mayor, to your point, the conversation about having somebody in finance that can help with that paperwork is part of this conversation. But it's still a skill set and a knowledge that somebody would have to have for us to be able to chase the grants that we need to graduate to the next level.
Okay, so colleagues, I think on the lobbying, is there consensus on wanting to give the manager direction to bring back or issue a solicitation for lobbying services? State lobbying services, we have an existing contract at the federal level, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Will we agree then that we're going to keep the money where it is now and put it out, to solicitation to get one back in for us to take a look at, bring it down a little bit and keep a contingency so that we have wiggle room?
I
Are we
think
good with that?
I think that's prudent.
Okay,
Yeah.
Everybody agree with that? All right,
Okay, so I think consensus, Mr. Manager, we'll keep the line item where it is, and if we can make sure to plan for the issuance of a solicitation for lobbying services. Okay? I mean, I'd like to see that process closed certainly by no later than the end of November, since committee weeks start in December, and we'd like to be engaged with the firm for those conversations.
Contract expires at the end of September.
Correct, yeah. I don't think we're going to get done before then, but, yeah. Okay, with respect to the grants writer, what's the consensus of the board?
I don't think we have a consensus. Why don't we just have the manager bring back
A
couple different
recommendation?
solutions? Yeah,
Okay.
a couple of different solutions and a recommendation, and we'll go through it.
Mr. Manager, do you want to give us, put some guardrails around some options that we can consider at the next
We'll
budget?
provide different ideas.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, lastly, to wrap up, again, if I can get this by way of information, I don't need to have a long conversation. I was privy to get a copy of the draft of the parking study. I'd asked Mr. Riverall to forward it to me. Feel pretty strongly that, we probably have too much enforcement happening. Over the course of the day, we could probably stand to bleed down at least one position. I think right now, on any day, we have 3 people enforcing on certain days of the week. That could probably be drawn down to 2. I just want to understand what possible staffing alternatives we can look at, and what the attendance savings would be, and also understand potentially what you and our consultant would estimate would be the lost enforcement revenue and possibly parking revenue against those savings, so we can weigh all that and maybe come to some sort of a consensus as a board as to what direction we want to give you and our contractor in terms of parking enforcement on a going forward basis.
Through the mayor?
Yes, sir.
Quick question, refresh my memory. Do we pay for the parking staffing? Is that part of our budget?
It's part of our base contract with Last Parking.
But that's what I was asking. If it's a contract based, is it based on?
We can terminate for, I said this at the last meeting, and it was not meant to be a threat to Last Parking, but we do have the right to terminate for convenience. And so what I would suggest is we have if we think it's advisable, we have a conversation with Laz about retaining them, but agreeing to a contract modification for the reduced staffing.
Got it, that's what I was asking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further questions? Okay. With that, can I get a motion on item 2, please? Madam Vice Mayor, do you want to vote on the budget, first reading, before you go? Sorry.
There's thumbs up from the.
So we have a motion on item 2, please, which is the adoption of the budget as presented with the request for further information that we highlighted for the manager.
I move item 2.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Corey, a second by Commissioner Kaye. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if you can call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Bonish,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaye,
Yes.
Commissioner Corey,
Yes.
Commissioner Lehman,
Yes.
Mayor Fernandez.
Yes.
Item passes 5-0.
Thank you. With no further business for this special budget meeting, we stand in recess, or stand adjourned.
I think they're solid. It just came right at